Ladies and gentlemen, the first act, the first 3 episodes of Arcane has been released, and I gotta say, Riot Games have smashed it out the park. This was pleasantly surprising to me on how good it actually was. I thought it would just be, a little bit of a fun series for League of Legends fans to watch, but I gotta say, it's a lot more than that. It's a lot better than that. Anyone can watch this and enjoy it. The animation is insane, and the voice actors on top of that did a fantastic job. So with that in mind, I thought I would do a video on the top 10 moments from Act 1 of Arcane. Before we get into the top 10 moments, let me paint the picture of what's happening in the show. It is located in Piltover and Zorn, so Piltover being the top side and Zorn being the underground. There's like a great divide between the two cities, Piltover being the rich, powerful, and educated. Meanwhile, Zorn is the polar opposite, basically, with the poor, dirty, scummy, and there's a lot less opportunities. So there's like this ongoing war between the two cities, and the show actually starts off with an ending of one of the battles between the two, which ends in the passing of Vi and Jinx's parents as Piltover and the enforcers get the upper hand. And so we see someone who's named Vanda takes in Jinx and Vi as their caretaker, and then we begin to learn that Vanda is like the leader of Zorn, someone that people of Zorn look up to as the one to make the final decisions, and he tries to keep everyone safe. And so then we fast forward to the beginning of the show. Top 10 moments starting now. Now, of course, huge spoiler alert, don't watch this if you haven't seen the first 3 episodes already. Number 10, the introduction of all the league champions in the show. I thought I'd just group this as one moment. However, we get introduced to Vi and Jinx first, along with their 2 friends Milo and Clagger. We learn that Jinx's original name is in fact Powder, and we are yet to find out why or when Powder changes her name to Jinx, but there were some foreshadowing moments of this. For example, Milo, after Powder loses all the valuable items they stole from the mission in Piltover, says she jinxes every job. Milo, we learn, is not very friendly towards Powder, as he believes she messes up every job and she is more of a liability than a help. Then right at the very end of episode 3, after all the crazy events that goes down, where everything just goes wrong, Vi snaps towards Powder and says, "Because you're a Jinx, do you hear me? Milo was right." Next we have young Ekko. He's also part of the Vi friend group, but he seems a bit too young to go along with their missions or adventures, and he doesn't have any of the powers or strengths of rewinding time like he does in League of Legends just yet. But a few League quotes make a bit more sense now. For example, in League, Ekko says to Jinx,
"I had a crush until you started talking to the gun."
And also in Legends of Runeterra, he says to Jinx,
"Man, I miss you so much. Powder, Never mind."
Also, we can go back to Ekko's reveal trailer, and we now know that the picture on the wall is likely of Clagger, and that is definitely Jinx on the left. The broken goggles you see are probably also Clagger's as well. Jayce in episode 2 is introduced as a young man who is experimenting with science and magic, trying to use science to harness magic without having magical powers. He has found something he believes to be revolutionary. This, however, gets him into trouble with the Council of Piltover, as he was using illegal equipment as part of his work. Heimer is introduced as a 309-year-old who is the Dean of the Academy and also head of the Council. We all know Heimer is a fantastic scientist as well, but he warns of the dangers of using magic, and if this power can be put in the wrong hands, this can go horribly wrong. A young Viktor is introduced as the assistant to Heimerdinger. Viktor is not someone that actually grew up in Piltover, but he explains that he was someone that had to work his way up to the top. Young Viktor appears to be a good guy, but we all know that he eventually pursues the
glorious evolution,
and it'll be interesting to see how that develops as the show goes on. Young Caitlyn is introduced as a friend of Jayce, but also someone that grew up in a very wealthy and powerful family. Her mother is also on the council. Then Silco and Singe. Now, Silco's not a champion, however we found out he is the main villain of the plot. His assistant is practically confirmed to be Singed. Now, Singed's name is not mentioned once throughout Act 1. However, if you had subtitles on, his name is labeled as Singed. Also, in the credits of the first 2 episodes, I think, it's also labeled as Singed. So we know for a fact that that is, in fact, Singed. Also, it's very interesting to note that it seems very clear that Vander will be the one to become Warwick. However, we can't really say this for sure certainty that this will be the case, but we do know, according to the lore, that Singed is the one that finds Warwick and experiments on him, and Warwick doesn't remember anything except for fire and a little girl, which seems very reminiscent of Vander's ending in episode 3, with Vi being the little girl he saves in the explosion. So it does make a lot of sense for Vander to become Warwick, but that is just a theory for now. We're gonna have to wait and see how it pans out. Moment number 9. Vi and the gang break into Jayce's house. This leads to Powder finding the Hextech crystals, I believe that's what they're called, and it uses arcane magic. Now, for those who don't know, arcane magic is the magic used by Ryze from League of Legends, who is a powerful sorcerer. I thought maybe the person that saved Jayce and his mother in a flashback could be Ryze, but it's probably more likely to just be a random sorcerer, but who knows. Unfortunately, Powder drops one of the Hextech crystals, which leads to it exploding, and this essentially starts a series of events, of course, ADC mains. Enforcers are now on the hunt for Vi and the gang. It leads to Jayce being investigated by the enforcers and the council, and like I said before, he was using a number of illegal equipment or items for his work, and so unfortunately this leads to Jayce being expelled from the academy and his work coming to nothing, as the council don't want to support his dream of using science with magic for a good cause, as they deem it way too risky. Moment number 8. Vi shows her punching/fighting skills for the first time as they get intercepted by some goons, who we later find out are actually like spies, I guess, of Silco. This moment kind of sets the tone for the rest of the show, as you're like, okay, wait a minute, this is kind of full on, this is kind of brutal. The slow motion punches with the blood, pretty epic, and we know for a fact that Vi already, as a young girl, is a very good fighter, and she hits very hard. Also, the very end of the scene was pretty cool, where Deckard holds out a knife, but Vi is unfazed and just walks up to him and says, "Want to see how that ends?" Unfortunately, Powder loses all the items they stole, and she gets blamed for a failed mission. However, she does realize that she still had some of the Hextech crystals in her pocket, which actually becomes a problem, as it is evidence that they were the thieves. This leads to moment number 7. The enforcers come investigating, and Vi and the gang have to escape as Powder has the crystals in her pocket. I added this as a top moment simply because of the moment the enforcers throw a Zornite through the glass basically establishes that the enforcers are not going to stop at nothing, and they are not afraid to use force to get what they want. Just prior to this happening, we also get a glimpse of Powder's talent with a toy gun, on how accurate she can shoot, which obviously, as we know, Jinx becomes all about guns as a champion. But we get a bit of a brief look at Jinx's potential. But have a look at this intense moment. In the end, Vi and the gang escape unscathed. Moment number 6. Singed demonstrates his potion called the Stimmer on a lab rat, turning it into a monster. This was quite a Monka-esque moment. We see that the rat attacked and turned on a cat. This gives them the go-ahead to use it on a human, and Deckard is the easy choice as a volunteer, as we see Deckard take it and start changing into a monster. We now know at this point that things are probably gonna start getting pretty ugly. This essentially leads into episode 3, which was just a roller coaster of emotions. Moment number 5. Vander hands himself into the enforcers to protect the others. However, the main enforcer is attacked and brutally killed by Deckard, and so is Belzer. Things just went to another level. We learned that Silco and Vander have a history. They were once brothers, however Vander betrayed Silco, and essentially ever since that moment Silco has sought revenge. There was also a deal made between Marcus, who's one of the enforcers, and Silco. We don't know the exact details, but it's very clear that the murders were not part of the deal. I imagine the deal was something along the lines of handing over Vanda to Silco, but not any more than that. Vi and Ekko saw everything that went down, which was obviously very traumatic for both of them. Vi then essentially gets together the gang to help save Vanda, but does not let Powder come along for the mission, as it's just far too dangerous. And once again, leaving Powder feeling useless and a failure. Moment number 4, we move back up to Piltover. Viktor helps Jayce finish his work, and together they manage to harness magic crystals using the science, which ends in Mel, one of the council members, proclaiming this is the age of magic. They somehow got it to work, and Jayce corrects her by saying this is actually the age of Hextech, not magic. This of course will lead to Jayce making his Hextech weapons for himself. As we know, Jayce in League of Legends uses a Hextech hammer and a Hextech cannon as his weapons, but that will probably be shown in future episodes, so we'll see how that pans out, what comes of this Hextech. Moment number 3, Vi shows her punching skills once again. So as Vi and the gang go to save Vanda, it turns out that it was a bit of a setup, as Silco allowed Vi to easily enter the building, and now they are cornered, trying to save Vanda. Vi puts on Vanda's metal boxing gloves as she begins to hold off the guards, starting with one of the best uppercuts you will ever see, knocking a guy 3 times the size of her into the air. This is definitely a spine-chilling moment as Vi is taking out these guards, especially if you're a Vi fan, should I say. It was definitely pretty cool to see. This, however, is short-lived as Dekard is fed another one of those shimmer potions, turning him once again into this purple monster, leaving Vi with no chance of beating him now. So survival becomes the main priority as they are looking for a way to escape. But we know that Jinx is going to come along and she wants to be the hero. So moment number 2, Powder, against her sister's advice, comes to help out by using the Hextech crystals to try and explode Dekard. However, the explosion results in the unfortunate deaths of both Milo and Clagger, as they are eventually crushed by rubble. The explosion also leaves Vi trapped as well. Jinx at this point thinks she has saved her friends. Unfortunately not. Dekard managed to survive the explosion. We also saw a glimpse of Singed actually being hit by the explosion, and this might explain why Singed eventually gets bandages like around his mouth if you look at the lead character. Guess we're gonna have to wait and find out if that's the case, but basically this explosion by Powder goes all horribly wrong, and it's a bit of an emotional shock, I would say, to the viewers, as Milo and Clagger were both killed, and you realize that Jinx was the reason for this, and you feel very bad for Jinx, or should I say Powder at this point. In one final attempt, Vanda tries to take down Dekard. He is unsuccessful, and looks like he gets killed by Silco in the end with a knife, but he gets thrown into a pile of shimmer potions. Barely alive, off screen, he manages to obviously take one of these potions, which turns himself into one of these purple monsters himself, which allows him to essentially get the power to fight back as he saves Vi by killing Dekard and jumping out of the building before the final explosion. He was unable to survive, it seems, unfortunately, but as we know, it seems like after this point, Vanda is going to be picked up by Singed and get experimented on, and this is going to lead to Vanda becoming Warwick. So we're going to have to wait and see how that turns out. Finally, on to moment number 1, the end of episode 3. It's a very sad ending to the episode. Vi and Powder essentially have a fight. Vi blaming Powder for everything. It's a very sad and emotional scene as Powder realizes what she has done. They're both clearly upset as they have just lost most of their good friends and family. Essentially, Powder and Vi go their separate ways as Vi is captured by an enforcer and Powder is found by Silco. And the last thing we hear Powder say is, "She is not my sister anymore. And then we actually see a close-up of Powder's eyes change to pink, which is a bit of foreshadowing of Powder becoming Jinx. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, those are my top 10 moments from Arcane Act 1. Let me know what you thought of the episodes, the first 3 episodes. Was there a tear in your eye? I imagine there was, especially on that ending. It was very emotional. The rivalry between Vi and Jinx. We know in League of Legends that Vi and Jinx have a big rivalry, and this pretty much explains why.